So thank you for everybody. This time I'm very honored to invite the Rachel. She is expert in the privacy space, and also she's working a very great work in terms of the impact assessment. I'm very pleased to have a call with her this moment and explore the great activity in this space. So Rachel, thank you for coming to today's interview.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you.
Cool. So let me share her profile first. Rachel is the part of the data protection and cyber risk service and applied research and innovation teams at Trilateral Research. She manages the client's project on data protection, compliance, as well as research projects on privacy, data protection, and the social impact of current and emerging data technology. Her key areas of focus and expertise include data management, data governance, and data security in the public sectors, energy sector, and security sector. Working with the technology developers to identify legal requirements, privacy and data protection risks, and the workable solutions has been a particular theme throughout her work. Rachel provides regulatory and policy advice for European national and institutional policymakers on the responsible implementation of the new technology systems. She involves in the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, the Amand Ecosystems International, the Open Data Institute, and the Surveillance Study Network. So again, it's great to have in a conversation with you, Rachel, this moment.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So let's start today's agenda with you. Then I'm very interested in your work at Trilateral Research because your organization is working very hard for the impact assessment or other practical approach in the research field of the privacy. So why did you start to work at Trilateral Research this moment?
Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly this moment. I've actually been at Trilateral for about 11 years. And what started, I was doing a couple of different postdoctoral research projects at different UK universities, looking at the privacy and data protection impacts of new technologies. And one of the things that I became really interested in doing was transitioning from looking at the potential harms that these technologies and data practices could engender to really looking at, participating in how they might be addressed. How can we have both new technologies and good privacy protections? And so I became really interested in things like privacy by design, ethics by design, and data protection. And so at that time, Trilateral Research was recruiting for a research analyst to join them on the Sapient project, which was a multi-million euro research project that was specifically looking at policy options for addressing these kinds of privacy, data protection, and ethical considerations. And so, through this work, I saw a real opportunity to do things like using privacy impact assessment as a tool to kind of operationalize privacy by design and have a positive impact on the development process so that we could consider these issues alongside the kind of the technical development issues.
I see. Yeah, that's very significant point. It's you're working on the privacy by design. Then also it's very significant this moment. It's been moving. The tech or service should be included the privacy manners at the first. In terms of the organization, is working a very unique service for me from Japan. You work with as a DPO service for some of the universities or any government public agencies so far. So how are you working with those institutional organizations for work on the DPO?
Well, exactly. We provide an outsourced data protection officer service to those organizations. And what that means is that, we're embedded within the organization as data protection experts to help them to, understand what information they need, when their staff needs in order to do their job properly and ensure they're legally compliant. We offer things like training. We do things like posters and advisory notes or how-to guides to help them to implement good practice. We also develop DPIAs or assess data protection impact assessments that have been done by people within the organization to ensure that any new programs, any new systems, any new technologies that they are going to use have appropriate safeguards in place in relation to data protection. We speak with data subjects. We speak with the regulators like the Data Protection Commissioner here in Ireland or the Information Commissioner in the UK. And really we assist them, from start to finish to monitor their compliance and ensure that, that they're continuously improving, that they're taking advantage of good practice that's out there. And it really frees them up to focus on their day job, so to speak, their day-to-day work, and we take care of the data protection aspects. And one of the really nice things about that is that, because we have a few different clients, quite a few different clients, we enable organizations to sort of learn from each other to some extent. And we're able to be this kind of centralized information hub that we can, learn from one organization and put it into practice in the other, or learn from an issue that happened in one organization and assist a different one that's having a similar problem. And so it's really nice for us to kind of be on the front lines of, addressing issues and in kind of developing protections and in helping organizations really to implement them on a day-to-day basis.
That's very cool. So when it comes to the working on the DPO service, I think in the UK has been exited from the European Union in the recent. That's very controversial even now, I assume it. So in terms of the DPO service, so what is the difference from the European DPO and UK? So you have any kind of the difference of the organizing and that?
There aren't very many. There are some differences at the moment. There aren't very many. When the UK left the EU immediately, one of the things that they did was to implement the UK GDPR. And the UK GDPR is very, very similar to the original EU GDPR. There aren't very many differences, which is why, at present, the UK has an adequacy decision from the European Union. There are some small differences, like, when does the clock start when you have to respond to a subject access request? And as the DPO, of course, one of our responsibilities is to manage that process to ensure that, it's implemented through to completion and to discuss with the data subject. And so, understanding those nuances is important at present. But right now, those differences are quite minor.
I see. Thank you. That's very kind of the interest for me. Then even the UK and Europe is very close in each of them, but they have a very different stance, and in each of the government official is the same, is the difference. So that's my curiosity. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's how it is right now. But of course, recently the existing UK government has released a consultation document outlining some proposed changes to the data protection regime. And those potential, if all those changes were implemented, they would have a significant impact on, how the data protection officer is located within the organization, and even if there is one. So, indeed, one of the proposals within that is to remove the requirement for some organizations to have a data protection officer, or at least to reconsider how independent that data protection officer should be, especially in small organizations where, it would be very difficult for someone to be the DPO but not have any other role within the organization as well. And so, I think that there are a lot of interesting, proposals within that. And I think that they're thinking seriously about what some of the, especially smaller organizations are finding it difficult to implement. But indeed, yeah, those changes would be significant if they were to be realized.
Thank you. So my next question is about the privacy impact assessment. Where is your expertise as well? Indeed, that's the primary for the companies or organization to conduct the privacy impact assessment to analyze whether the products and services it's been protect the consumer rights. So that is a very primary, I assume it. So when it comes to the privacy impact assessment, in the UK and in Europe, it's been the growing after the GDPR has been started in the regions and they famous at this moment, or it's a very minor. The company is organizing a privacy impact assessment at this moment.
I mean, I think especially with the introduction of the GDPR, there's been a significant impact, certainly on data protection impact assessments, more so than privacy impact assessments. I mean, up until the implementation of the GDPR, Trilateral Research was mostly a research organization, but because we had such a long history of doing privacy impact assessments or data protection impact assessments, we were really well positioned to, be of assistance to organizations once the requirements to conduct a data protection impact assessment, were entered into force. And so in our experience, that has really supported the development of all of our commercial services, including both the consulting services and the technology development service. Because many government departments, became really aware that a DPIA would be required anytime a new system, were to kind of have potential impacts on the rights and freedoms of data subjects. And so, in our experience, most public sector organizations are quite conservative and they are quite interested in ensuring that they have robust protections in place. And so, really that has become the norm, I would say, and it's accepted practice now that DPIAs are an important part of assuring compliance and of protecting data subjects, and even of thinking through the kind of the implications of a new tool or system. I mean, it's been a really important part of our service and an important part of educating, staff within government departments that, about what the considerations are, about what kinds of controls and measures you should have in place to mitigate those risks. And many people have come back to us afterwards and saying, actually, these set of questions that guide you are a really useful tool for me to understand what I need to do next time I want to, and what questions I need to ask next time I want to look at a new system or a new project. And so, it's been, I think it's been a really interesting transition to see happen and for it to become business as usual now. I know that you were asking about privacy impact assessments, and it is true, though, that the data protection impact assessment does very much focus on things like storage limitation, on purpose limitation, and things like that. It doesn't, and it follows the data protection principles quite closely. It doesn't necessarily look at other privacy issues like, freedom from discrimination or reductions in bias and things like that. And so, but at the same time, I think that where the DPIA offers an opportunity to bring these issues up, most government agencies are very interested in making sure that they're doing the right thing and making sure that they're, that their systems are ethical and that they're offering people the best protections possible.
In addition to the former questions, I would like to ask you this very similar question that I had with you, that's in the UK and Europe. UK has been left, right? In terms of the DPIA, is there any difference in European DPIA and the UK? Because I visited the ICO website where they released some of the a bit of the explanations of the DPIA from the ICO parts. So do you think it's a different impact assessment in between Europe and the United Kingdom?
Again, at present, no, I don't think it's very different. However, if some of these proposed changes by the Department for Media, Culture and Sport were to be implemented, then there probably would be quite significant changes. I mean, one of the proposals, for example, is to eliminate the requirement to conduct a data protection impact assessment where a kind of a broader privacy program is in place within the organization. And so it will be interesting to watch that kind of continue to evolve and see if those sorts of changes are actually implemented. Because, I think if they were to be implemented, it would be important to have really strong guidance about what that privacy program looks like, how it can be assessed, and, how it can offer a similar level of protection that data subjects in the UK are currently able to enjoy or able to access. And so, really watching this space and watching things develop over the next couple of years will be interesting. the most important thing is to make sure that, each, no matter where organizations are located, that they have the tools available to them to be compliant, and also that, where they're operating cross-border, that they have sufficient support in place to be compliant in both jurisdictions, so that they, that they're continuing to offer the same level of protection across those borders.
I think cross-border transport is in a significant point to assess and audits before the sending the data to the other jurisdiction. That is the primary issues out of Europe as well as the other countries, and even Asian companies is trying to solve that issue as well. So indeed, the privacy impact assessment is one of the requirements for all the companies in the future, I assume it. Thank you. So my next question is about your more specific expertise. On your website, it's been describing the 4 parts of the privacy impact assessment elements. I was inspired that, you have a very different angle, the different taxonomies working on the privacy impact assessment. That is a very interesting part for me. So could you tell us about your 5 privacy impact assessment elements? Then what is the difference of each categories they have it?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, we do Trilateral Research. We do a lot of different types of impact assessments. The privacy impact assessment is the one that perhaps has the most, the longest history, shall we say. And so that one really looks at, the privacy issues that may arise, including data protection, that may arise when a new tool or system is being developed and deployed. However, as part of doing that work, we realized that there are also, kind of broader questions from a social science perspective or from an ethics perspective that should also be considered. And so we began doing ethical impact assessments. And actually, an ethical impact assessment is a term coined by one of our founders, David Wright, who wrote the first articles on that. And that really looks at not only, kind of what the issues beyond privacy that should be considered, and things like dignity or autonomy and things like that, when, and the ways in which new systems can potentially impact that, and how the system should be designed to take account of those potential impacts. At the same time, there are also, beyond privacy and ethics, there are larger, like, social issues to be considered, and a lot of times those social issues need to be considered in context. And so, the way that a system or tool is used in one context may raise different issues when used in another social context. And so using our kind of sociology backgrounds or anthropological backgrounds and larger social science expertise to think through some of those potential impacts has been really valuable for some clients. Finally, at the same time, as technologies kind of proliferate, it's important to understand that from a legal perspective, it's not just about privacy and data protection. There are other legal frameworks that, developers may need to consider that are beyond those specific requirements. And so, we use the folks on our team who have a legal background to help them look at things like intellectual property issues, liability issues, and things like that, where they're looking at new technologies. And so it's really about looking at the technologies through a lot of different lenses to basically to undertake the most comprehensive assessment possible where that is of interest to the developers, and to really help them to, build next generation technologies that are really sustainable, because they're sort of considered all these issues in advance. And so there wouldn't be a lot of retrospective changes that would need to be made to comply with societal changes as we all continue to grow and develop as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't see those kind of the approach so far. Then that's very knowledgeable. That's been a very good reference for the company who wants to take on what is the impact assessment, the different angle. It's not just the privacy itself, but also it's been inclusive, more social impact in the future. So that's gonna be the forerunning all the processes in the future. I was inspired because. So in addition, I would like to ask you about your publication. It's a little bit some years ago, but I think it's very helpful for the people who wants to work on the privacy, because it's defined the 7 types of the privacy. So why did you came to work on these publications, and how did you define those concepts and definitions into the 7 piece of that?
That publication actually came as well from one of our research projects funded by the European Commission. And the idea behind it was to look at, we used Roger Clark's original, 4 types of privacy, and thought about the ways that, technology is developing at a very fast pace, and what the potential possibilities for further, different types of privacy intrusions may arise. And so, we undertook a research exercise to consider whether those 4 original categories captured enough of the potential impacts, or if we needed to expand it to other types of impacts as well. And so that's where some of the additional changes have come from, looking at things like, biometrics and human enhancement technologies. And, especially, I mean, again, as you say, this was a few years ago, and we were still responding to, some of the changes around September 11th and changes in security technologies and initiatives and things like that. And so, that's where those expanded categories came from. What I found in practice, actually, though, is it has been extremely useful for privacy impact assessment, because it really gives people an anchor for their imagination in terms of understanding what the potential risks are. I think a lot of times system developers are really focused on what they want the tool to do, and have difficulty imagining what else the tool might do that they don't want it to do. And so when you give people these categories can be turned into questions, and it helps people to imagine the other uses of their technology, or the unintended impacts of their technology, which people have said it has been very, very helpful to them.
I see. Yeah, that's knowledgeable with me as well. That I've been reading up, so that is the very understandable to all the privacy experts as well. I recommended it personally. So let's move to the next question. Is about the future landscape. So you have your company is working on the many of the project at this moment. I was interested in one of them. It's social tech for good, which is the very innovative approach of your project initiative. So what does this project work in an organization? What is the purpose they're aiming for the futures with this project?
Yeah, so Sociotech for Good is our software development service. And within this service, we have put privacy by design and ethics by design into practice to help public sector organizations tackle complex social problems. And these include social problems like child exploitation, preventing human trafficking, protecting civilians on the ground, and and many other different types of potential uses. And Sociotech combines, the social science insights and methods with technological insights and methods to, help our clients by generating kind of data-driven insights in context. I've done quite a lot of work on drones, and one of the things that, I always tell the industry folks is that if you use the same type of drone with the same type of attachments with the same purpose, but in a slightly different context, new, different privacy or data protection issues can arise. The same is true for AI. And so if you want to if you want to do it ethically, you can't just build an AI system and then, put it into different contexts. You have to understand the domain. You have to understand the questions to be answered and the data that's being generated. And then you have to be able to interpret the outputs in context. And so combining the social science and the technical science within every AI system that we build really enables us to support meaningful insights for our clients in context so that they can deploy it effectively.
I see. So in terms of the artificial intelligence, I assume that's been very hard to implement the impact assessment after sorts of the executions of the technologies, right? Maybe the output is coming already. It's very hard to define which kind of the impact should be taken to develop the AI products. So what do you recommend it to make excellent work for the privacy impact assessment for the AI in the futures. So probably practically it's not easy to assess and correct. So you have any idea of that?
Well, actually, I think that's where our focus beyond just privacy impact assessment is going to be really useful, because we look at the social issues, we look at the legal issues, and we look at the ethical issues. And so recently we partnered with Ernst & Young to develop a library of AI risk assessment methodologies to look at the different possibilities for assessing AI systems. And what really came from that work is a bit of clarity that, getting algorithmic transparency or explainable AI, providing a solid foundation for both of those aspects is going to give us a really good head start in making sure that, we're able to change as the AI systems change and to offer, a foundation for developing some robust protections. If we understand what the AI system does and how it does it, and we give people that information, it will be, it'll be a strong foundation for moving forward.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So lastly, I want you shared of the message to the listeners, because you have many experience and expertise in the space, the privacy impact assessment, and also the privacy research in the field. So could you give us any message from your perspective?
Well, I think it's really important to look towards the future and to think about the ways in which we need to continue to adapt, as a society, to make sure that we, develop technologies in ways that work for us, and that help us to kind of accomplish the objectives that we want to. One of the things that I think it's important not to, turn away from technology, but to make sure that we deploy it in a considered manner that helps with innovation, including privacy innovation, and then also helps us to live sustainably. One of the ethical aspects of AI, for example, that I often talk about is the fact that, the potential, resource efficiencies that come from using AI tools shouldn't be limited to the commercial sector, where public sector organizations are experiencing quite a lot of resource constraints. They should be able to access that as well. But of course, if we're going to be using, data about people, especially in building public services, then it's really important that, we put sufficient protections and safeguards in place to enable both to happen. The forthcoming or the proposed EU regulation, AI regulation, provides a lot of those potential considerations. And it'll be interesting to see as that moves through the different committees and the different, organizations within the European Commission, how it changes and what aspects stay the same. But I think that there's a strong potential there for Europe, it's the same way that Europe has emerged as a kind of being in the forefront of personal data protection. I think that there's a strong possibility that Europe could also emerge as being at the forefront of, AI regulation in a way that makes sure that it works for both technology and for citizens.
Thank you for your great message. Yeah, I'm quite a fan of your work in privacy by design work into the practice. That's going to be very helpful to learn from your experience, and your team is working on the space. So again, thank you for Rachel having a time, Stephen, a very precious morning. Then let's keep updating in the space and try to seek the flourish of the privacy world in the futures. So thank you for having this moment.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.